need to tell you about this work in racism. So navigating racial divides has been a lifelong endeavor of mine and also been one of the most instructive tools in my learning or leaning toward a more mature sense of justice. Racism and its effects have always played a role in my life from the time I was this big because I grew up in two vastly different places. One, Prince George's County, Maryland, which sits right on the border with Southeast Washington, D.C. I was a Forest Heights kid and loved it. And the other place was in Mississippi, central Mississippi. Summers were spent there, and the rest of the year, unless like my mother was too ill to care for us, were spent in Maryland. In PG County, I was surrounded by a sea of brown-skinned people from all over. Not only were there African Americans, but there were Africans. There were Asians from the entirety of the Asian continent. There were islanders, and there were so many from other Americas. In Mississippi, I was not. In Maryland, it was impossible to not have brown and black friends. In Mississippi, it was absolutely impossible. In Maryland, no one used the N-word, coon, chink, or any other slur without the very real threat of a very real ass-kicking. And when I was there, I talked funny because of my thick Southern accent. That's kind of slipping out now. But in Mississippi, I was told I talked too black. And the racial slurs that I mentioned just a second ago, and others like jungle monkey and tar baby and mammy, and like they were regularly used by everyone, everywhere, including my uncles who preached the good word on Sundays, but apparently couldn't sustain that good the entire 7 days a week. As a kid, I watched my parents remain silent as their parents and other family members used all of those racial slurs to describe my friends and neighbors, people who I adored. Now, they weren't talking about people that I actually knew. Like, they didn't say so-and-so. But, of course, as a kid, when adults are talking about one black person, my mind and heart went to all of those I actually knew. And I don't know if I was merely following my own parents' lead or if I, too, was just afraid to say anything to my parents as they were to their own. I imagine it was probably true. I did know that I needed to keep my mouth shut around the other adults, and I did. And it was excruciating because I knew at the very core of me it was wrong. And after one experience with a paddle in the first grade, because in the first grade, my mom was sick enough that we had to go live there. I got my first paddling in public school there. I got the paddle with the holes in it. So I learned the hard way to not challenge those things. But as a youngster, I lived with the feeling that my silence implied that I was just like them, that I was the racist they were. So I'd go back to Forest Heights filled with shame in the fear that other people would see it. Like I had a branded R on my forehead, or the N-word from my grandfather's vitriol would just like echo through me like a fucking contagion. Now, of course, those things don't last because kids are kids and we get back into our own stupid little groove and have a brain fart. Sort of. I never brain farted that, though. In part Actually, it's not like that. At 6th grade, my parents decided we needed to go to the Fairfax County school system, where my brother and I, like, they decided that's where we needed to be to get a better education. So we crossed the Woodrow Wilson Bridge into the bastion of whiteness that Annandale, Virginia was at the time. My first day at Camelot Elementary School, I cried. I couldn't stop crying. I cried because there, kids who didn't even know me told me I talked funny in that too black way with the Southern accent, and I was gangly as hell, and I was surrounded by varying shades of white and pink without any other hint of ethnicity, until I was sent to the principal's office, Mr. Rucker. God bless him. He was a dark-skinned African-American man, and he let me sit in his office and cry, and he made me feel like I actually hadn't landed on another planet, and that I would be fine, and everything else would be fine. He didn't make fun of my talking. He offered a hug and a Kleenex. And he let me be, even as I felt like the whiteness around me was wearing sheets. Now that may seem a bit overboard for a 6th grader to think, because like I was 12 at the time, and you would think, white 12-year-old in Annandale, Virginia, it has no connection to the Klan except in those places in Mississippi. I spent time, we were 25 minutes outside of Philadelphia, Mississippi, and I knew about Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman long before Mississippi Burning appeared on the big screen. And I still wonder if my grandparents or those Southern Baptist preacher uncles had actually participated in that murder or something like it, or if they would have gladly just joined in if the opportunity had presented itself. And clearly that's not going to be part of family lore. Nobody's going to go around bragging about wearing white sheets. It wouldn't have surprised me then, and it wouldn't surprise me now if that truth did come out. And that was epitomized by the last conversation I had with an extended family member in the mid-90s when I went to go back to visit. I wanted to go see my favorite cousin. He was older than me, but he was the cool cousin, man. And he was getting dressed for work. So, like, he's back in the bedroom and I'm in the living room and we're just hollering back and forth, right? And so he walks out head to toe in a blue police uniform, and he asked me what I thought about his monkey suit. And I was like, but wait, I thought a monkey suit was a tuxedo. And, you know, a police polyester is not that. And he responded with a big old grin and said, it's a monkey suit because it gives me permission to beat monkeys. His meaning was clear. His uniform gave him carte blanche to beat people. Not every people, but black people. And he was proud of it. He sat there and grinned. And while he's grinning, I nearly puked. At the time, I'd been dating for, 5 or 6 years, an African-American man. And my cousin brought a fear that I hadn't seen to the forefront of my mind in years. And I fled. I just fled. I ran, trying not to puke on myself. And so when I was a professional adult in like the mental health and criminal justice fields, interactions and systemic racism is sort of like this whiplash of childhood stuff and more. Like this whole thing, like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I have listened to cops and judges and therapists talk like my grandfather. And like in the last conversation I had with my dad in 2015, I couldn't help but wonder if he if he couldn't hear himself when he would say things like, well, Detroit isn't such a starry state because essentially, like I'm summing up his words here, blacks just don't know how to work or maintain things. Bitch, they are building your cars. And when my dad learned that I was in the area, not initially to see him, but to meet with a Choctaw Alikshi, who's a medicine man, he informed me that things would be so much better for Indians if they would just assimilate. He was also very pleased that he gave regularly to an organization that would help them do that. Let's help them become so much more white. So my father at the time was an 80-year-old physicist who, despite growing up in Mississippi, he worked and socialized with people from all over the globe. And this is how he thought of them while he was spending time alongside them in their homes having dinner. They're coming over, right? And although I didn't know that when I was younger, it confirmed for me things that I'd wondered about, like as a youngster. Like what my parents thought as they listened to their families, my extended family, speak vitriol and disgusting things without saying anything, and then returned back to those with whom they worked and shared community. We're just like, hi. Clearly, I walk through the world as a white woman. As a white woman who works with brown-skinned ancestors. And that pisses people off and frightens them. It's often more than just awkward when I show up in communities looking for people related to a particular ancestor or group of ancestors. The openness of the interaction and potential for relationship generally depends on the age of the person I'm with or the dramatic nature of my appearance in community. For instance, if I'm bringing someone back to their native birth mother, into their native land after they were adopted 40 years prior, there is no denying the spiritual nature of the unfolding, and race doesn't have a prominent role. If, though, I just show up driving through a First Nations reserve or a res here, some truly do feel intruded upon and distrustful of a white woman who claims relationship with ancestors, no matter the number of eagles circling above. Sometimes, though, the interaction has moved beyond the surface of the skin long before I arrive, and the strange is always, I thought this would come, but I thought it would come after I hung up my bow, or I knew you were coming, but like I didn't know you would be you. Those are fun. Mostly, though, the reaction is fear and anger. And that is mostly divided by generational lines. Those older than 70 or more open, as are those who are under the age of 18 to 20. Between there, though, lies this middle ground that requires learning how to dance with each other. And it is sometimes not graceful. Sometimes hilarious, but sometimes not graceful. Because I want to know, why did my ancestors come to you? You're not an Indian. Yep. Clearly. However, there are some within Sioux country that will see me immediately as Lakota or Nakota. There are Choctaw who will look into my face and call me brother. And there are other folks of the medicine way that can directly connect and say, I see those, all those around you and all of those within you. However, most can't see me the way their ancestors do. They don't understand that Wavoko walks beside me because he saw me ages ago and knew me before I was born. Sitting Bull, Washakie, Poundmaker, Crowfoot, and more walk with me because they see me too. However, their breathing kin mostly do not. Though, of course, like I have mentioned, there are exceptions. They can't wrap their head around it, but they can't deny it. I'm just not supposed to be, like, I'm not supposed to be real. I'm not supposed to be this way. I'm really not supposed to be this real. So I walk with these brown skin ancestors. And in fact, I don't just walk with them. I work at their direction. I work at their direction. I'm alive because they protect me in strange and unusual, amazing ways. I heal in part because they have taught me the medicine in 4 specific ways. And yet with the most pressing issue at hand, I cannot connect with their breathing kin in the way that is the most useful, in the way that opens the door to ending missing and murdered Indigenous women. This is like the race issue is just one of those myths I don't know how we bust out of, or if we can. But it is a primary challenge of the experience for those who have similar ways of walking through life, especially in Indian country. Working with ancestors and things of the natural world in the manner I do is, even in Indian country, is considered impossible, the stuff of fantasy or insanity. White folks call it uncivilized people, or they're just not as developed as they need to be, or they need to be saved, right? That's still a thing. And there's this there's this learned thing about human primacy, that the humans are over all things, and then there's all of these subdivisions and hierarchies that for millennia we have held onto these fallacies because we had something else dangling out as like promises for advancement. The advancement and the raising of vibration. And we forget that we are not separated from anything. We are not individuals separated by species or death. There is no separate nature. We actually are nature. We are another element within it, and we are in communion and relationship with each other at all times. Our opposable thumbs do not bring with them an inherent superiority. Like, I often cringe at the use of the word spirit because it too implies something that is outside of us. That it's separated from the boundaries of our skin and therefore less than or more than. And neither is the case. So I communicate with beings that others cannot see, and with those that can be seen but are identified as inanimate or animal and therefore considered incapable of communication. Ancestors, angels, stone, others, and all these, like, they're not residing on different planes or other dimensions out there somewhere. Like, there's not a God that is somewhere but everything, and we got a little tiny bit. Like he's a universal participation prize. In my way of being, this, whether I'm the voice of this living God or not, one of the messages that humans are not the center of the universe. The universe is big. And our desires and need are not prime in all things universal. And all things universal doesn't have a favorite flavor of the day. And this way of expressing the world is not comfortable for most people, although many people have tried to capitalize on it. because it's been seen as like the uncivilized or the heathen, right? Since the, in quotes, Enlightenment with a capital E said it was so, right? Except if we can commercialize on it, woo, yes, then it's true. We've tried to rape it and beat it and legislate it out of existence from indigenous peoples from around the globe. We is white folks. As we've plowed across it, fuck me, we've messed things up. And so I'm this white woman who comes in with indigenous ancestors and faces additional layers of suspicion, prejudice, and fear, born by the history of their own ancestors' attempts to survive eradication and assimilation, thanks Dad, and appropriation of indigenous people and their ideals across continents. And so this is coupled with these beliefs about historical and modern slavery. Like our own government despite having access to the data that states very clearly otherwise, purports that slavery does not happen here to American or other citizens in the modern world of North America. To most outside of the government even, because it's not seen here, it's not our problem. It occurs over there. It's somewhere else, out of sight, out of mind, relegated to undeveloped, uncivilized countries where we think people are valued less. And that it's commonly accepted that government and law enforcement there in those faraway places operate extra legally, as if by virtue of being American, our agencies are incorruptible. Lo and behold, how we're learning that's wrong. There are multiple nonprofit organizations whose mission is to rescue trafficking victims here, both in the U.S., even though it doesn't exist, remember? And they raise their money here, though, but operate in other places on the globe, from Central and South America to South Asia, parts of Africa, Eastern Europe. But here we are facing history's repeating of itself, or people being people-y again, standing firmly in this falsehood that says America is a particular way, and Europeans were the only ones that traded in slaves. And so there's a missing and murdered indigenous women's awareness campaign. There's many of them, with the slogan that says human trafficking is not traditional, when in fact it is. The phenomena of human trafficking, particularly that of women and children from Indian country, is entwined in the histories of indigenous peoples all over, including those in North America. And I'm reminded of this because somebody from the Navajo Res posted that they're reading The Other Slavery. I highly recommend it. But still, that out of sight, out of mind thing is still there, and it doesn't help modern victims. It perpetuates the roles of traffickers and law enforcement, and it negatively impacts those rescued who are not believed, cannot find resources for healing and recovery, both either within their communities or outside of it. Long before the Spanish flooded Mexico and other Europeans made their way to the mainland of what we call the United States and Canada now, indigenous peoples stole women and children for labor, for sex, and for the trade of goods to other tribes, and then to the Spanish and to the French and to the English. And so we can't approach the healing of all of these communities and breaking the ties or eradicating the modern practices without understanding the larger historical context. The methods of abduction and modes of travel may have changed, but the basics remain the same. Exploitation of vulnerable communities and individuals. The routes used in the 1600s are still being used now to transport and sell to the highest bidder for the maximum profit. So Andres Resendez is the man who wrote The Other Slavery. The subtitle is The Uncovered Story of Indian Enslavement in America. That's something I have heavily used in my book that will probably never get published, but it was so instrumental on seeing how modernity, as we call it, and history do this. It was mind-numbing and heartbreaking and mind-blowing. And it's like a detailed accounting about so many communities were decimated, not just by the diseases that we're told about in the history lessons, but by the theft and sale, particularly of women and children, and of those children, particularly girls. One of the first things Mr. Resendez begins with is the beginnings of this other slavery are lost in the mists of time. Native peoples such as the Zapotecas, Mayas, and Aztecs took captive to use as sacrificial victims. The Iroquois waged campaigns called mourning wars, M-O-U-R-N, mourning wars, or neighboring groups to avenge and replace their dead. And Indians in the Pacific Northwest included male and female slaves as part of the goods sent by the groom to his bride's family to finalize marriages. Among the elite, of course, because, Native Americans had enslaved each other for millennia, but with the arrival of Europeans, this is a long quote, practices of captivity embedded in specific cultural contexts became commodified and expanded in unexpected ways and came to resemble the kinds of human trafficking that are recognizable to us today. Along with the attachments that we collectively have of history as we know it, or want to know it, is the idea that this way of experiencing the world, this way of being in communion with all things, is that the capacity to do so belongs to a group of people or a specific type of person within that group of people. And that's simply not true, be it of the medicine way or of sexual perpetrators. There is no ownership of that in the same way that sage has no owner. Their medicines or the medicine are not owned. Ancestors are not bound by the rules of lineages that we think they are or should be. We're the ones who confine those things unnecessarily. And I watch as more people try to become spiritual by attaching to things that are presented as truth based on false histories. It's for this reason I actively choose not to use language associated with what is largely known as metaphysics or New Age or the commercial ideas around spirituality. To me, the nature of that language is one of conformity. It is a way of being in, like while on the surface appearing to challenge established religions and atheism, But for me, it's merely another religion that's been co-opted to reflect more of a marketing strategy rather than sharing truths or creating space for other truths or explorations outside a limiting framework. My nature is to move beyond the boundaries of that or any kind of uniformity. And what I speak of here is directly connected to MMIW because it's beyond this language about what a psychic is, about what spiritual is, about who can do what, when, and where, and how. And it's moving with this relationship or knowledge of relationships with the visible and invisible worlds that is truthful, that is honest, and that is least recognized as real in the Western world. In my life, none of these things can be separated. These experiences cannot be removed from history, and the other truths it tells us cannot be removed from racism, because bless those who think we're post-racial or there will be such a thing as colorblind. A, I don't think that can exist, and B, that limits how we see others. I have never said, I just don't see color. Why in the world would I deny somebody their first most visible expression to the world? Why? Why would I do that? Why would I deny them that beauty? That sense of self, right? I didn't mean for this to go on so long. I think I might actually divide this video up if I can figure out how to edit it, because actually no, I'm not. These things aren't separate. I may not have expressed their interconnectedness in a way that most folks will sit through, like however many minutes this is, but they can't be separated. Compartmentalizing bits of truth to make it fit the preferred attention span of some folks is not something I'm really cool with. All of that is to say, race and history are absolutely part of this, and it's something that must be recognized and it must be called out, no matter who is telling us, well, we can't talk about race. I guess we can. We're just going to keep on keeping on because, as one does. Bye, y'all. Till next time.